The Star Wars train is moving guns blazing towards the May 27th release of Disney Plus's Obi-Wan Kenobi miniseries. The last project to take place in the post-Return of the Jedi era was the Book of Boba Fett, which featured an appearance from Pedro Pascal's Din Djarin. Today, we'll see why this cameo was absolutely necessary in the show. Firstly, why was the Mandalorian featured in the show? Disney recently released a documentary about the show titled Disney Gallery Star Wars: The Book of Boba Fett, which is basically a making of the show documentary. It takes us behind the scenes of the series and features some insight from the creators, including why the Mandalorian was bought as a recurring character, and Dave Filoni talked about the Book of Boba Fett and why they decided to include Din Djarin and plot lines from the Mandalorian. Filoni stated that they felt that it would be quite difficult to tell the full story of Boba Fett without having an appearance from Din. He added that Din's a friend of Boba's and that they have decided to have him featured from the very beginning. They explained that they both had a bunch of things they wanted to accomplish, so they felt that it would be difficult for them to go a whole season without seeing him. He's a friend of Boba's, so it makes sense to bring him back into the story. It's really no surprise that the producers liked Mando and decided to have him back for the series. Favreau joined in and talked about the father-child dynamic between Din and Grogu. He said that it felt like fertile territory to continue Mando's story after their separation, because his life had lost meaning. Having the Book of Boba Fett come into the timeline and let everything settle allowed them to let some time pass and introduce the Mandalorian after he'd taken his helmet off. That father-child relationship that had developed between him and Grogu was no longer there. The show's creators continued by talking about how exposition can be a huge speed bump when it comes to other stories, but how it is opposite in their case because people want to know more about the lore. Favreau also mentioned the backstory that was set up in the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian and all the questions that came along with it about Mandalore's history. They believed it was a good time to show imagery from events that were brought up in that show. The imagery had to be evocative of what George Lucas and Dave Filoni created in Mandalore and the animated shows, so this was their way of diving into it. So why did the Book of Boba Fett feel so disappointing? Before the Book of Boba Fett was released, it was being marketed as a kind of Season 2.5 of The Mandalorian. The first 4 episodes featured Boba Fett and Fennec exclusively, but the later episodes were solely devoted to Din and his life after being separated from Grogu. The finale showcased a team-up between Din and Boba, and towards the end, the Mandalorian was finally reunited with Grogu. The two headed off on Din's N1 starfighter, and that is where their story will pick up in The Mandalorian Season 3. Despite the Book of Boba Fett's many similarities to its parent show, The Mandalorian, it doesn't quite live up to the expectations of its predecessor. But why? The Book of Boba Fett got relatively disappointing feedback from fans, and The Mandalorian is the most likely reason for this. Both The Mandalorian and The Book of Boba Fett depict clear samurai film influences, much like the original Star Wars trilogy. In this instance, these shows hit Star Wars' raw soul and explored its world through a more personalized, character-based lens. However, despite their many similarities, the two shows have a slightly different focus. The Book of Boba Fett feels a bit more mature and reflective, which is appropriate considering it focuses on a more seasoned character with a wiser outlook on life. Meanwhile, The Mandalorian is more adventurous and forward-focusing, following a character growing from his past, as new opportunities challenge his values and worldly outlook. Even though both the shows follow reserved main characters, they differ in their pacing and general tone. It is this difference, coupled with the overwhelming success of the more energetic Mandalorian series, that is causing problems for the Book of Boba Fett. Considering that The Mandalorian's last season showed a changed Boba, the Book of Boba Fett offers answers to compelling questions about the bounty hunter overall. The Book of Boba Fett isn't a bad show by any means, but due to its heavy similarities to the highly successful and overall better executed Mandalorian, Boba Fett just felt a bit underwhelming. Though it may take fans a little more time to adjust to a differently paced Star Wars show, the Book of Boba Fett's reception in connection with The Mandalorian does carry some merit. We're sure the audience will come around. Next, The Mandalorian brought Boba back and made him cooler. Developing Boba Fett is more than welcome by Star Wars fans, but The Mandalorian understands that such development is really the cherry on top of Fett's character. Boba Fett's Mandalorian appearance in full armor is one of many points about his character that would be a real treat for fans to appreciate the character even more. The Book of Boba Fett did do a lot to develop Fett as a character, but The Mandalorian's bits and pieces mentality towards revealing him is more effective. Don't you agree? The Mandalorian recognizes the pertinent questions about him, answers them for fans, and then leaves viewers wanting just a little more. Over-explaining Boba Fett ruins the risk of forgetting what made the character valuable in the first place. He's a character of action and of choosing to do things on his own terms. Anything more is the icing on the cake. Time for some other related news. The Mandalorian set the bar for other Star Wars shows. The Mandalorian received an explosive reaction from the audience upon its release. It gave streaming rights to Disney Plus and had many people investing in the streaming service just because of their show. Viewership for The Mandalorian set it in the top 20 most watched TV shows of 2020, according to streaming data. And it's easy to see why, setting itself as one of 2022's biggest returning TV shows. The Mandalorian left season 2 with pressing questions as where the show could go, and us Star Wars fans can hardly wait. The Mandalorian rightfully set the bar for Disney's Star Wars TV shows by effectively exploring other aspects of a franchise which was already bursting with material. By wisely introducing main characters with an orphan alien child, the show provides the audience a great reason to be invested invested in its otherwise closed-off lead. There's a fine balance of well-paced action and gripping lore, along with opportunities to present familiar characters like Ahsoka Tano and Boba Fett. Naturally, The Mandalorian was destined to be the ultimate launching point for many other Star Wars Disney Plus TV shows, and the show's execution has raised the standards for everyone else. Did The Mandalorian make Djarin the better Boba Fett? So far, Boba Fett's exciting potential as a Mandalorian is all set up thanks to Din Djarin's excellent character development. So much personality still shines through Djarin's helmet, though his actions and choices, all of which exemplify the character's core values. Missions help the viewers connect with what's valuable to the Mandalorian, and his bond with Grogu strengthens the importance of these missions. While the show's popularity owes itself to the very existence of Boba Fett, the show sets Djarin up as the better Boba Fett regardless. Pascal's Mandalorian exudes a reserved demeanor that strengthens the character rather than holding him back. His personality traits are tools for growth and character development, not obstacles. Din Djarin's clear-cut values make something as simple as removing his helmet off a huge character choice. Boba Fett's helmet ethics doesn't exactly give his character this luxury, which isn't really a problem besides the fact that character development must come in different ways. Hence, there's only so much that viewers can care about Boba compared to the Mandalorian. Let's just agree that the two have completely different auras. So what's next for Din Djarin? Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni are trying to create a universe within the Star Wars franchise, where each project plays off one another. Kind of like how Marvel Studios formats the MCU. The first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian were the introductory chapter into the shared timeline, and the Book of Boba Fett was the first project to branch out from the main story. As Filoni has stated, Boba and Din are now friends. The writers have established a relationship between the two of them in Season 2, and they now know that they can count on one another. So now there's no need to worry about it not making sense for Mando to show up in the show. Boba had a problem he couldn't solve on his own, so naturally, he turned to one of the only people whom he was on good terms with for help. Din's main focus throughout his own show, as well as the Book of Boba Fett, was Grogu. Even after their separation, he went to the planet that Luke Skywalker was on, just to check on him, which further strengthened their relationship and bond. Grogu ultimately chose to turn down his Jedi training so that he could be with Din, and now that the two are back together again, Mando can focus on the task at hand, instead of worrying about Grogu. And that's a wrap for this video. So what are your thoughts on Boba Fett and Din Djarin? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one!